Hey everyone, it's Jonathan Reiber, VP for Cybersecurity Strategy and Policy here at AttackIQ for what I consider to be one of the most exciting Purple Hat sessions of the day. We have the founder and CTO of AttackIQ, Stefan Chanette. Hello, Stefan.
Hey, Jonathan.
It's great to have you. We literally wouldn't be here were it not for Stefan. So, Stefan, thank you for creating the company and bringing us all together. And today you're going to talk about Jupyter Notebooks and really about data and how customers use Jupyter Notebooks to visualize and talk about data. Is that right? Is that why we're here?
That's why we're here.
Okay, cool. So the format is Stefan's going to give a presentation. I'm probably going to interject with a couple of questions, hoping to carry proxy for all of you watching with the occasional interesting question. And then at the end, we'll have a little bit of back and forth after he finishes. So with that, Stefan, I'll hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jonathan. All right, let's get started. I'm going to be talking about advanced cybersecurity reporting with Jupyter Notebooks. If you are not familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, that's okay. I'm going to give a little intro, and we're going to jump into how some of our customers have used Jupyter Notebooks and what AttackIQ is planning to do with Jupyter Notebooks inside of our platform. So first off, if we're talking about reporting, you might be thinking, well, I already have reporting. I already, create cybersecurity reports and hand them to my team, and we already discussed them. So why do I need kind of another mechanism? Well, Jupyter Notebooks is very special, and some of the problems that it solves when we're talking about your current day reporting is when you think about how your team today is creating that report from maybe a vendor technology or a platform or extracting that data, it's pretty time consuming. You certainly can agree that it's expensive to have, from a resource perspective, to have those conversations and figure out what's the data that we need, who is the audience, formulate the report, a lot of back and forth amongst kind of the stakeholders and the audience. And once you actually create that report and generate it as, say, a PDF or generate it as a Word doc or a PowerPoint, it's probably a few weeks until it's handed off to that audience member and you have that discussion. It's probably out of date. So a lot of different issues. And already we're not even talking about the language that maybe your audience member, whether it's on the risks team or the DevOps team, that you're actually formulating these reports in a language that they can understand.
Yeah.
Jupyter Notebooks, as we're about to discuss, solves a lot of these issues. And the entire point of reporting in general isn't just to hand off a big fat report to your manager, your director, the CISO, the CIO, or another team member. That action is not what's important. What's important is getting the right data, extracting the right data, so that your team, your executive team, can essentially make the right decisions, not
Mm-hmm.
waste resources, and be as effective as possible in improving the business.
Yep. And this is obviously foundational for the effectiveness of a threat-informed defense because you need data in order to see how well you're responding to the adversary.
Yep, you need absolutely, Jonathan. You need the right data, and sometimes that data, obviously is surrounded by language to explain what that data means, and that data has to be the right data for that right audience member. Okay, so let's talk about Jupyter Notebooks. So if you're not familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, it is essentially a web-based application. You can download it today. It's open source. You could download it and install it on a machine, on a server. There's Google Colab. There's Microsoft BI. Lots of ways to access the Jupyter Notebook kind of framework. Once you're inside of the Jupyter Notebook framework, its power is really in the fact that it allows you as an individual or your team to start interacting with a platform that has an API. You can use Python. There's other languages that it supports, so you can use the Python libraries
Mm-hmm.
and start interacting with data. But it's not just a framework for programming and coding, so that everyone can kind of stare at code. It actually has a huge benefit that it can be used to present that data to your team. And so, you can add text blocks, you can add an executive summary. All of this can be done in real time and changing the code, extracting the right data at the right time, and then creating visualizations that everyone can stop, sit, listen, discuss about what it's outputting in real time, so it's not out of date. And if the security team member wants to extract other data, they can do that on the spot during a conversation about a decision that needs to be made.
Mhm. That's awesome.
Yeah, very powerful. Um, and so, with that in mind, and with kind of the power of Jupyter Notebooks understood to some degree, let's talk about how it's been applied in, by the AttackIQ kind of customer base. And I think it's worth going through these stories just because I think our audience is really going to benefit from hearing how other customers have used Jupyter Notebooks. Um, and so obviously these are AttackIQ customers that I'm about to talk about. And what they've done is use Jupyter Notebooks and use the AttackIQ API, extracted data in order to have the right kind of conversations and make very effective conversations towards a threat-informed defense kind of strategy. Extracting information about the threat, about their defenses, in real time. Again, this data is not out of date when you're doing it in Jupyter Notebooks because it's interactive.
Hmm.
Um, Creating visualizations, and those visualizations can be charts, graphs, they can be Excel files that have those visualizations, they can be PDFs. That conversation's had, decisions are made, and they're much more effective, again, than what we were previously talking about, where current day reporting, you might create a 50-page report with the wrong data, and it sits there for a week, and a decision's made, but it's based off incorrect data. Where these three customer stories we're going to be talking about really success in using Jupyter Notebooks to create the right type of reporting and effective decision making.
Great.
All right, so let's talk about customer story number one. So this particular customer wanted to use part of AttackIQ's capability in looking at attack campaigns. So in particular, they were concerned with certain threat actors, APT10, APT29, and FIN6. And the question that the security team wanted to answer and wanted to demonstrate internally to the rest of the team was, if we were to emulate uh, the various tactics and techniques and procedures, the TTPs, um, of these particular threat actors, not just individual TTPs, but as an attack graph, as an attack flow, to use the MITRE attack language, um, how would our controls respond? So we're going to exercise our various endpoint security controls and our network security controls. This is part of the core reason that breach and attack simulation BAS exists as a category, is to exercise your controls against adversarial behavior. And so the question this security team had was, if we exercise adversarial behavior in the form of an attack campaign, end to end, several techniques chained together as an adversary would act, along the way, when would or endpoint security control get triggered? Would it detect that behavior? Would it prevent that behavior? Would our network security control detect certain behavior, prevent that behavior? That was the question. And then how can we actually communicate that? And so on the left-hand side, this is a Jupyter notebook. This is a real Jupyter notebook that we've kind of abstracted for visualization purposes. And you can see that there's Python code on the top, and that Python code will generate essentially an attack graph. And that attack graph represents one of the threat actors that I mentioned on the bottom right here. There's a little bit more code that's been written, and these notebooks actually have been provided by the AttackIQ team and are run by the security teams of our customers. And the additional code creates a simple table, and the table is much more abstracted to have a conversation with the executive level, the
Hmm.
management level. And the question that it answers is, all right, given the three actors that we're concerned with, listen, I don't need to know the details. Your manager might say, I just need to know, are we good or are we not good?
Yep.
And the conversation here you can see around the security controls isn't the details, but simply green or red.
Hmm.
And sometimes at the highest level, certainly at a board level or at a very executive management level, the details aren't what's important.
Hmm.
What's important is green or red. Are we good or are we not good? Now, as we drill down to the more technical or operational focused teams, they need to know the details.
And you
But
can
in this,
define, Seven, you can define what good and not good means, right? So you could say in this case, you both detected and prevented. But could you perhaps set it as we detected and prevented 80% of the time?
yeah, there's thresholds
Hmm.
that can be defined, and it's customizable. That's one of the powerful aspects of Jupyter Notebooks is that it's every security team. There's certainly similarities in how they operate, but
Yep.
there are very particular nuances that a security team might say. Listen, what good is to us is that we've prevented or detected 80% of the TTPs within the attack flows of APT10. That's green to us.
Hmm. Cool.
And to your point, Jonathan, the other aspect is we've worked with security teams that says, listen, we're a detection only operation.
Hmm.
We never prevent any of the behavior unless it's absolutely, without a doubt, malicious. There's just too many important aspects of our business that we're not willing to prevent anything. We'll detect and respond. And so, in some cases, to your point, green could mean we detect, and it has nothing to do with prevention. So it really is up to the security team on how they want to define what is good um, or what is bad.
That's fascinating. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, right? Like,
Right.
I've
Yeah.
as from my standpoint, I've always operated under the position of I want to prevent certain kinds of things. That maybe that's a topic we could raise some other time.
Yeah.
Um, how, Stefan, can you talk briefly how long it takes to get from zero to this kind of data with the Jupyter Notebook? Well,
Yeah.
let's say you present a report in the morning and your exec staff comes back and says, "Hey, I want more fidelity on A, B, and C." How long does it take to instantiate that kind of analysis?
Yeah. Well, and that's a good question, Jonathan. Um, the data we're accessing in this particular notebook, this Jupyter notebook, is the data that is available via the AttackIQ API. Now
Mhm.
you can utilize other APIs to bring in and correlate other kind of data sources from say MITRE attacks, taxi service, or other things. So these Jupyter notebooks can be as complex or as simple as the security team needs, depending on what they're trying to present. So to answer your question, though, if the management team comes back to the security team and says, "Listen, we see what you're doing. We've kind of analyzed the data, but we need this other detail. How long does it? You're asking how long might it take to add some of these details, and
Yep.
that really comes down to what are those details? Are those details that are accessible via the API they're already using? Is that going to take them to extract it from another data source that's outside of AttackIQ um, to look at? I mean, today some of our Jupyter notebooks will bring together, say, Tenable or Qualys and AttackIQ data together. I'll show a little bit later. And so there's several data sources that you can combine to enrich what data you already have. So
Yeah.
sometimes it can take 2 minutes, and
Mhm.
sometimes it might take a few hours depending on what you're doing. But the very powerful aspect is that once you do it, once you have a Jupyter notebook that really has a core purpose and it's just a finite detail, it should be fairly simple, just a few minutes of a change.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. Um, so the previous Jupyter notebook that I shared, um, it's obviously visual in nature. You saw that very simple table, and that's meant for more of an executive level. You saw the graph, and that's more meant for the operational aspect. So some of these Jupyter notebooks can be very targeted in the sense that the creator, the security team, and we're talking about modern security teams or really teams that want to move in the direction of a threat informed defense. You're dealing with information, you're dealing with data. How do you extract data? How do you manipulate that data? And the data we're talking about is obviously the information that you want to present to your team to make those decisions. So in this case, the security team wanted to present to the technical management team, the CISO, CIO, chief risk officers, and they really wanted to demonstrate their current security posture against relevant threat actors and those campaigns that had existed in the wild. And they wanted to demonstrate the gaps. They wanted to demonstrate what they're focusing on. And like any good reporting, reports come with almost a storytelling aspect to it. And so as we're extracting the data and within the Jupyter notebook, again, it's you can extract and build out an Excel file, you can do a PDF, or you can look at the Jupyter notebooks in real time and see the data that it's outputting embedded inside the Jupyter notebooks. And the idea is that you're visualizing uh, enough evidence and proof that intentionally has the reaction from your audience. And in this case, you want to be talking to the technical management team, and you want that reaction to be, look where our gaps are. Um, Here's the budget that we need or the resources that we need in order to improve. And again, this is true of any reporting, but what's powerful about Jupyter Notebooks is this can be done in real time. And as you're having that conversation or have presented this data, everyone can remain very confident that this data is up to date and it's been created by a Jupyter Notebook, that it's just hasn't been created, say, in a PowerPoint, and has come from the mind of the security team member, but it's been extracted from an API and maybe several data sources, and it's very credible. And thus, the decision is that much more important, and will be taken that much more seriously.
Yeah, it obviously points out. I don't mean to slow you down too much, but it obviously points down to the need of having a good data scientist who's managing at the back end, so that you trust the data to begin with, right?
Yeah.
It almost feels like in cybersecurity management, when you're dealing with trying to generate performance data, the 60 to 70% of it is cleaning the data at the back end first. And when you and I did the security control failure report last year, the most of the time that we spent was on going through the parameters of the data and making sure that we trusted it. And once we did that with the brilliant data scientist, only then could we say, how do we interpret what's coming out?
Yeah, yeah, and it's true that within security teams we are seeing within our customer base, they either having a shared resource within the organization that has a data science component, or members of the security team are leveling up their skill set. And if they didn't know how to code, they're learning to code. If they didn't know enough about data science before, they're up leveling their skill set, because more and more it's not just about knowing the particular details of how to go and threat hunt, or you know triaging, or understanding a particular threat or reversing a piece of malware, but also understanding, once you have the data, to your point, how do you clean the data, how do you analyze the data, and then how do you present the data with a particular position to your audience. And data science is a huge portion of that.
Yeah, awesome.
um, so let's talk about another customer. And so this particular customer came to AttackIQ with a use case that their security team was very technical. They use particular EDRs that allow their security team to implement their own detection logic, custom rules within not only just their EDR, but also their network. And so the team was looking at various threat actors. Again, and here what we'll see is APT29 and say Fin6, and they had created custom rules to detect this behavior within their security controls. And the question that they had was, once they emulate these threat actors using AttackIQ, um, these attack flows, these attack graphs, obviously aren't just one tactic, technique, and procedure. There's several that are chained together and they flow together. Will our endpoint and network detection and prevention technology detect and prevent at the beginning, the middle, or the end? Are we kind of stronger from a security defense perspective the beginning, the middle, or the end against each of these threat actors? And do we have discrepancies where we as a security team might have invested heavily in the middle somewhere, but it's actually we're incorrect and we're actually missing everything in the middle, or for some reason we're higher in detection at the beginning. And they wanted to create proof and evidence to understand if the logic and the rules and the evidence would corroborate what they assumed to be true, or if they were false in their assumptions.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I just love this. It's good to be able to go from where we were 10 years ago in cybersecurity, where we didn't know what the heck was going on with an adversary, to then using MITRE ATT&CK to create performance data, to think about the entire chain. Sometimes you have to pause and just think, I can't believe we've come this far. And this is like just such an exciting thing to imagine.
Yeah.
It feels abstract when you just read about data science, but this is so cool. So thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Well, I think MITRE ATT&CK's done quite a lot for the industry, certainly around the language that we can all speak from a common language that we can all speak. So in this particular case, if you see this middle chart, we've used Jupyter Notebooks, and again, AttackIQ provides most of these notebooks, but it's not to say that the security team can't write their own Jupyter Notebooks. Again, interacting with various APIs, including AttackIQ's API. And in this case, what we're seeing is APT29, um, as the attack flow ran and the various tactics ran, the detection and prevention techniques were actually quite successful at the beginning of APT29 in detecting or preventing the tactics. Well, in this case, let's just talk about detecting. Um, and then in the middle, uh, there was a gap. There was a discrepancy in terms of the ability to detect the various tactics. And then the end of the APT29 attack flows, the endpoint technologies were successful in detection. Um, in kind of the opposite view, from a Fin 6 perspective, those same endpoint technologies were successful more towards the middle and the end, but had missed everything at the beginning.
Hmm.
This is where I have two circles, and you can see APT29, the red in the middle and the red at the beginning of Fin 6.
Hmm.
Uh, and so this now, because of this data that the Jupyter Notebook has kind of extracted and exposed for the security team to have a conversation and
Mhm.
share with the rest of the security team, a conversation can be had around real data, and you can have a data driven conversation
That's
and,
amazing.
and
Mhm.
come up with a conclusion where resources should be best placed.
That's great.
um, we were talking again about MITRE ATT&CK, and so this can obviously be framed in such a way that we talk about the attack flows and where success has been had, or there's failure and gaps to put more resources towards. But this is also on the bottom right here. We can see if we look at the MITRE ATT&CK matrix, the enterprise um, framework, in terms of various tactics and techniques. If you look at all kind of attack flows together and all the attack campaigns across the threat actors you're concerned with, in Jupyter Notebooks, one of the extraction points that this particular Jupyter Notebooks will present back to the user is, where are you weak in terms of the MITRE ATT&CK tactics across the board from left to right?
When we do this next time, we might be able to expand it a little bit. But so I'm just going to peer in, and the camera's going to get really close to my face. Everyone, look in together, right? Let's look closely. You can see the blue and the red and the green. So red is bad, right? This is illustrative um, for when things have failed. But this is really transformative in terms of thinking about how a certain threat has fared against you versus not. And so when you mentioned with the attack flow earlier, so you could run an attack graph, well, in our platform, the
Mhm.
operationalization of the attack flow, you could run an attack graph and then you could say, which part of the attack graph are we consistently failing at?
Exactly.
That's really neat.
Yeah, exactly. And AttackIQ is, the only or one of the few BAS vendors that has implemented, attack graphs. Is our kind of naming convention for these attack flows.
Mhm.
It's crucial that you're not just as you're emulating behavior in order to really measure your defenses, that you're not only just emulating the individual tactics and techniques, as in obviously the real world, when an adversary is moving around your network or is on a device, there's a before and there's an after. And so that is the attack graph in the AttackIQ platform that can be emulated.
Hmm.
And it might be that within a lot of these EDRs that are using machine learning, um, it takes a certain amount of behavior before something's triggered. It's not just a single technique that has been independently run. It's a certain sequence of behavior that will trigger the EDR, or a certain sequence of behavior that will trigger the network security control technology to then alert the security team, because that technique alone is not malicious. That technique, though, when it is paired with several techniques in a particular fashion, given the right procedural aspects and characteristics and parameters, that has been viewed in the wild as malicious, and then the technologies will trigger. So AttackIQ has emulated attack flows in the form of attack graphs in our platform, and that's very, very powerful.
Yeah, and then so on the defensive side, you like that's the adversary emulation side as you're running this comprehensive campaign that triggers AI and ML based technologies because it looks real and specific. And what you're then saying is you can then go one step further and say where have my defenses performed well and where have they not, um,
Exactly.
which is amazing. That's so cool.
Exactly. And you go back to the Jupyter notebooks here, and it's really the up to the security team, and the security team perhaps working with a data scientist, or if the security team doesn't code, working with the development team,
Hmm.
and extracting the right data to tell the right story.
Hmm.
And in some cases, the data needs to be presented in a very technical fashion with absolutely every level of detail.
Hmm.
In this case, if the security team is perhaps working with the implementation team that is configuring the security technologies and coming up with the rules, that particular technology team has the question goes, okay, well, you ran APT29. At what node, at what point, did we not detect it? And exactly what rule were you trying to trigger?
Hmm.
And you can present that all in one package with Jupyter Notebooks, bringing together through um, conversing with several different data sources, an entire package to the right audience. So they don't have to have a lot of back and forth conversation. But at the same time, if you're trying to present this particular data, that there's discrepancies, that we can't catch anything at the beginning of any of these campaigns. We're doing well in the middle, but these actors are actually, this is an emulation, but in the real world, if this was to happen to us, we'd miss everything in the beginning. And if you're
Hmm.
trying to tell that story to the executive level, you would present it a little differently, and perhaps abstract the level of detail out, so that it's obvious to your audience member, but who doesn't need all those details. And again, Jupyter Notebooks is a fantastic mechanism to extract the right data at a certain level for the right audience member to make decisions.
I come from a Defense Department background. This will be my last interjection for this. Otherwise, I think we could obviously talk forever about it. But from a defense standpoint, when we think about DoD readiness, the amount of data that massive amounts of people in the department would come together around to assess readiness, 4 stars regularly meeting, folks running in the field, big data analysis, and one of the findings was after running exercises in Northeast Asia, missions were not achieving their objective, right? And the question was why? And only through really intense data analysis did they figure out that it wasn't actually anything to do with the equipment. It had everything to do with the housing where folks were living in Northeast Asia. And the housing was leading to a decrease in morale for families and people. And that was then impacting readiness. And only by taking the sort of data based approach. So if you think about cyber threats scaling against a country and an entire country trying to get ready for what's happening, you could extrapolate this kind of analysis on a macro level where if everyone is using this kind of database analysis, you can then measure how ready you are for certain kinds of campaigns that we're afraid of occurring, for example, during the Russian invasion of Ukraine, right? It's an easy measurement to say, if we can scale this kind of database analysis for key parts of critical infrastructure in advance of an attack and say, where are we ready? Then security teams can look and say, we've run these techniques that CISA has warned us about. And what we've learned is at the beginning, we're weaker than we thought for APT 29. And that's the kind of strategic level application that I see when I look at this.
Yep. Yep.
That's
Um,
great. Yeah, go ahead.
so this is kind of a similar level of detail that we just talked about. Again, this is all about storytelling, not just so that we're sitting around having fun and hearing a story, but a good story has to do with really understanding your audience, really presenting your audience with the right facts, so that they can make the right decisions. In the previous example, it might be that different levels of abstraction might go to a technical team, the level of details, versus the management team that really needs to understand. Okay, I can see that we're failing at the beginning. What are we going to do about it? Or I see we can fail at the beginning, and the technical operations team says, I need to know the details in order to improve that. Um, so it was what you just talked about in terms of readiness, Jonathan, is a great segue into this last customer story.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it has to do with historical performance. Certainly in any example from a security team where they've asked for more resources, or they've asked for more time for a particular project to improve, what they want to demonstrate week over week, month over month, quarter over quarter, year after year is improvement. Now, security is one of those fascinating aspects that you're never done. And so, it might be that, you had the proper controls, defenses, configurations, detection rules for APT10, say in February. And if we're looking at the top right hand corner on that chart, well, then what happened in March? The conversation might come, geez, you're running this Jupyter notebook looking at historical, performance. I thought we were good on APT10. I thought green would be forever,
Hmm.
but threat actors and their campaigns change. And so one of the things within the AttackIQ platform is we update our campaigns, we update our attack graphs. And so certainly, you might have tested our attack graphs for APT10 in January and February, but our research team might have, gotten information about a particular threat actor and updated that attack graph to include the more up to date aspects of campaigns. And in
Hmm.
March, your security controls aren't able to handle it anymore.
Hmm.
And so certainly performance has to do with what didn't work and did you improve it and is it working now? But it also has to do with the fact that um, these threat actors are also ever changing, and so your controls are changing to obviously improve on maybe the gaps that they had before, but you need to also historically be able to measure current data sets against these attack flows. And so again, there's two things you need to demonstrate here. You might say, hey, in January we had a lot of gaps for AP29. That's what I'm demonstrating, and in the top right hand corner here. And we, the from Jupyter, we use Jupyter Notebooks to extract the right data, and we showed obviously in January we had
Hmm.
gaps,
Hmm.
and you can extract data from your Jira ticketing system in terms of what tickets might have been formed and closed, and work had been done to improve on certain configurations and control like detection logic rules. And now in February, we've improved our defenses against AP229.
Yeah.
Um, so that's demonstrating, again, historical performance that can be talked at a management level or at a board level.
Hmm.
And that's one thing to demonstrate. And the other is this constant historical performance against the ever changing kind of campaigns of these
Yeah.
threat actors and where you currently stand from a defensive control perspective. So no one's fooling anybody. You really have the right data, and you're looking at your current state of defenses. And if you're failing where you weren't before, the campaigns could have changed, or a configuration could have been, included for some reason, but you're failing. So this
Yep.
data is always up to date, and that's one of the powerful aspects of Jupyter Notebooks is extracting that data and looking at the right data over time to understand how you were doing and how you're doing today.
One of the things that Lewis Honor, the former group CISO at Bupa, likes to talk about is human performance factors. And so
Mhm.
if you're looking at January and February and you're doing well, or you're doing relatively well in January and February, and then March you have a drop off. To your point, Stefan, the question is why, and it could be that the tactics change, it could be misconfiguration, but it could also be that that Timmy left the organization because he wasn't getting paid enough, and because he left the organization, he didn't sign off on an MSSP contract, and because it
Hmm.
didn't sign off on it, the contract lapsed, and that's why the thing isn't working anymore. And so you then have to go and investigate what's happening. And to improve performance is not just about, are your bifocals working and did you read the Python correctly, which is probable a lot of the time, but it could also be these other human-based elements from a management standpoint. So this is a helpful way of thinking about organizing your team.
Absolutely. And your team, before presenting this data, obviously can present it in real time or analyze it before they're about to present it. And
Mhm.
they'll analyze it and obviously say, hey, listen, APT 20, 10 here in March, we missed it. And a conversation can be had, again, that's data driven. So why do we miss it? And to your point, it might be a technical reason or it might be a people issue.
Yep.
But that conversation could be had. It's based off data, and then you can get your story straight and the right facts in place so that when you do present it, um, it's presented with kind of the right facts in place as to why we're missing it in March now.
Cool.
Yeah. So obviously, and this is again another aspect of why it's important from a storytelling perspective. Know your audience, know the question that you're trying to answer, know the reaction you're trying to get from that audience, and just really understand the narrative. And it's important with any aspect of reporting, and certainly Jupyter Notebooks because you're able to tell a data-driven story. So even more important that you're coming to the table with some structure. The last thing I'll say before we kind of talk about what we're doing with Jupyter Notebooks at AttackIQ is that Jupyter Notebooks are a means to an end. There really is no limit to what you can do with Jupyter Notebooks. It's extremely powerful. Most security teams are already using it to some degree. They've been, using it out of band, where they'll download it or they'll interact with kind of a cloud interface of Jupyter Notebooks. But you can extract any type of data and formulate really amazing visualizations using the Python libraries that are native or third party libraries. One example of that is we've gone and created Jupyter notebooks around just executive reporting. And
Mhm.
you might look at this and go, "This was created by a Jupyter notebook." Yes, indeed. You can create PDFs, Excel files, embed visualizations. You can have executive summaries. You can have again those text, code, and visualization blobs within Jupyter notebooks. And Jupyter notebooks can extract and download files like PDFs and PowerPoints to really present this data in the form of flowcharts or spider graphs, executive summaries, definitions, talking about coverage and effectiveness of testing. It's quite advanced.
It's great.
Um, so we wouldn't be talking about Jupyter Notebooks if Attack IQ didn't feel strongly that um, we feel that it is a massive component of reporting. And for so long, we were providing Jupyter Notebooks to our customers, and customers of Attack IQ were writing their own Jupyter Notebooks, interacting with the Attack IQ API, interacting with MITRE ATT&CK's, taxi server. Uh, Tenable, Qualys, other APIs in order to bring data together and really create the right type of reporting structure to make the right type of decisions. And because we feel so strongly about this, one of the releases that we have is that we have integrated Jupyter Notebooks inside of the AttackIQ platform. So what we've done instead of our customers having to operate these Jupyter notebooks outside of our platform is we've integrated Jupyter Hub as a module inside of the Attack IQ platform. And so the power here is that you can go now inside of Attack IQ and access dozens of Jupyter notebooks that have been curated and written by the Attack IQ engineering and research team that help bring together data. So earlier I talked about the enrichment of Qualys and Tenable data, and so we can actually create some very powerful reporting around control gap enrichment that takes Qualys or Tenable data as well as the Attack IQ data, understanding your control gaps and understanding your vulnerabilities, and creating some reporting. Um, we've taken examples that in discussions with customers that they have conveyed to us, the questions that they're trying to answer, the narrative that they're trying to tell amongst their team or to their superiors or their directors or CISOs or to the board. And we've created other notebooks that really extract data points that can be told again at the management level or at the operational level regarding endpoint security control validation, WAF controls, email controls, cloud and identity controls, to do comparisons or historical performance analysis. And again, sometimes it's at a very technical and detailed level, and sometimes it's at an abstracted level in order to really convey the points that you're trying to tell, so that
Mhm.
decisions can be made.
So cool.
Yeah. So this is something we're pretty proud of, and it also will speed up the use of Jupyter Notebooks amongst our customers or anyone dealing with emulation of threats to understand the gaps in your controls and trying to even correlate other data points and data sources to come together. Jupyter really is powerful as an interaction mechanism.
Yep.
So, pretty proud of this. The team at AttackIQ is extremely proud to be presenting this. Dozens of AttackIQ created Jupyter Notebooks, various tiers of levels in terms of how we're presenting the data, all around certain use cases. That's one point within the Jupyter Hub, that it's organized by use cases. And at the same time, these notebooks are really utilizing the power of Jupyter when they're presented to the users. That these notebooks can be further customized.
Mhm.
So, Jonathan, you asked earlier, it's like, well, someone has to make a small tweak or change. It's not like AttackIQ is just presenting this report in its static form. The power of presenting it as a Jupyter notebook is it's already valuable as it is. But if the team needs to make small changes because the CISO or the security director has said, hey, listen, we really need the data presented in this way, or can you include this other data point? That security team member can customize the code within the Jupyter notebooks that have been provided by AttackIQ themselves, and then extract the right data and to make the most optimal decisions for the team and for the business.
That's great. I mean, you and Jose Barajas get a lot of credit for bringing this idea into the company and instantiating it and pushing it. So this is immensely exciting to see.
Yeah,
Um,
we,
and
we, we do get a lot of credit. There's a huge team behind AttackIQ who work very hard on this, are incredibly intelligent and very versed in Jupyter notebooks and data science. And so, they deserve all the credit, but we're very proud to present this to our customers in the market and the industry. The industry for a while now has been using Jupyter notebooks, but I think it's so much more powerful when you can embed it inside of the platform versus having to live outside of the platform and extracting data. So I think this is going to be very, very beneficial to many security teams.
so cool. That's why we call this presentation "Landing on Jupiter."
um, well, to conclude, the Jupyter notebooks. You've heard me use the word powerful probably several times in this presentation, and that's really how I describe Jupyter notebooks. Yes, there's elements where you're coding inside these Jupyter notebooks, but ultimately what this does is this puts the security team in the driver's seat. This allows them to provide the right data to the right audience, not just be handed a report from a vendor platform and have to present it and then copy and paste or take screenshots. I mean, this is the right way to do reporting if you're talking about data extraction, in order to drive data driven decision making, ultimately for the executives to make the best use of resources for the team and for the business.
So great.
Yeah. So that's what I had for you today.
Stefan, this is awesome. It's one of the things when you first brought this in, when we first started talking about this idea, gosh, almost a year ago, and to now
Mhm.
see all the use cases and stacked up stories and data that's been delivered, it's incredible to see the progress. So thank you very much for presenting today. It's great to see you, and again, it's really especially useful to, I think, and to look at how you went from founding Attack IQ as an adversary emulation platform to bringing in this concept on reporting and analysis and continuing to innovate. So thank you very much for presenting. If there's any questions from the audience, you can have them in the chat, and we'll be around to field those questions. But Stefan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.